Greetings, bloggers, vloggers, followers, and podders. Dustin here from Dustin's Dynasty. Here at you with you today with another edition of this week's vlog. We're a little late, but we're here, and that's the important thing. Been catching up on stuff this weekend. Work was a little exhausting, so I had to take some time for self-care, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially for men. Often it's something that is kind of just men don't kind of like that thing, but for me, it's very helpful. So moving on, we're going to talk this week's blog and a little bit about how that evolved. So I've talked about maybe anger one time, and specifically not really about meltdowns and anger. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit about my story of meltdowns and anger in a somewhat way. I'm going to try not to be too triggering, but there are some words here that may trigger someone. So I do want to be upfront about that. That come with my history that could have been a cause. I'm not sure. We're still processing that in therapy after 20 years of it. So, bear with me. If you feel you have to take a pause or you have to leave the screen, that's definitely okay. Just as long as you feel you're educated. And this is basically done as a way for me for this week is because somebody, had to work on their anger that I communicate with. And as a result, I felt it was important to make it this week's vlog because it's a story of, I come from a generational effect of anger, traumatic, and then it resulted in traumatic behavior. But in essence, it's how you manage it and how you control your emotions. It's taken me a long time to get there. I'm 37 now. I'm going to be 38 in a few months, but it's taken me a long time to get there. And my anger was very full blown out. So without further ado, we'll get into it. So when we talk autism is often related to meltdowns. The general public conceives autism as people who violently act out, destroy things, so on and so forth. And believe it or not, at one time I was that person. I was the person who was very destructive. I didn't care, and it was just rage. And whether I knew it or not, I just wanted to either make attention or, get my point across that I couldn't handle something. This comes from years of systems that was not made for me. It comes from being with people for years that knew how to inflict my triggers and cause me to get into those moments of anger and rage and go eventually into a meltdown. It was systems not built and not understood that ultimately ended up in, very less desirable consequences, which put my parents at the end of their rope, literally nearly almost broke them, but they rebounded back. And slowly over the years, the meltdowns had diminished to at a point here in October and January of 2023, I have not had a meltdown in nearly a year and a half. And I can't say that it's not easy. It wasn't easy. And I think what the ultimate principle behind the way of realizing I had to work on it myself. And I understand, not everybody is able to manage things the way that I can on being autistic. Everybody has a different way of managing things. But for me, the sole principle behind wanting to work on my anger and my spontaneity and controlling my emotions more was the fact that other people who had valued me and looked up to me and even followed my platform had seen me in these rage and angerous events and was really shocked that could happen, and that through all the story writing, through all the blog posting, that this still happened and I did not have a full grasp on it. And so from that point on, I made a initiative to work on things. Eventually, I would build boundaries and work even more on my mental health to take care of me. And in fact, this past weekend, things happen. And, normally I would get enraged or upset or take it out on people, but it doesn't happen anymore. And I'm not saying there's a magic pill or a magic way that things happen that make it that way. It's just, and yes, medicine does help to a degree. It was me getting back on my medicine, but throughout life, regardless of medicine, regardless of whatever food we were having, and that's a controversial subject as well. I think what made me realize I just didn't want people seeing me like that anymore. And I think that's ultimately any autistic person's perspective when it comes to after having a meltdown of something, of whatever stimulants or sensory barriers that they may not be able to control, is the fact that they don't want to be that way. They don't. And anybody looking down on them or looking at shock is kind of like, it makes us feel very, very unbelievable. It's just something that nobody wants to, we don't like being looked down. But, for somebody to say something to me in that way, it just struck a chord with me. And I think that was why I had to say it was the end for it all. And there's some conflict in the community on the two camps, whether meltdowns are healthy or not, or what's wrong with not going meltdown free. But I think if you can the way with anger and your expressions is knowing how to properly channel your emotions so that you're not acting that way. And I think that's what the last year and a half or so has taken, a lot of work, putting in a lot of work to choosing not to act that way and choosing better ways of channeling my emotions so that so it's not in that manner. It's not, I'm not expressing my way by expressing my anger or my hatred or just getting in a full-blown meltdown. That's just not the answer. That's not the answer. And regardless, if you have to find a way to be healthy when you express your feelings or hatred or anger, so that you don't take it out on anyone, or that it doesn't cause issues with others. So, I think it comes from, I just think, a lot of history in the part of anger comes from a lot of trauma with it, I think I've always had meltdowns pre-diagnosis. At diagnosis, they were at the height, and a lot of people who work with, who are either connected as a care or connected as an autistic being, say that puberty wreaks havoc on having meltdowns. And that is no lie. When I was 14, 15, even 16, puberty did a real humdinger on, my meltdowns. It was the fact, the answer was passive restraint. And I get we have to protect people, property, etc. But back then, and I guess in a sense you have to, but in a sense, it just wasn't. It was something that in the end caused a lot of triggering. Not a lot of triggering, but a lot of trauma, and I still recover from that. It's taking a long time to recover from that and process that. Moving forward from that into, eventually, after the answer was when I was acting out, and it was specifically when I was 15, because people just want to know what was going on. How do we fix this problem? How do we stop this behavior? Was automatically get in the car, drive an hour to a psychiatric hospital and be admitted. Now, granted, it's 2023, it's almost 2 decades later, and that just doesn't happen anymore. There is such a demand for hospitals, things of that nature, and I see it a lot, in the news. And, as such, I wouldn't recommend that. But that, for me, that was the answer. And, the last, I think, hospitalization that I had almost 22 and a half years ago, was when I reacted after, a very traumatic weekend in my psychiatrist's office, which ironically was not too far from the hospital where he was out of. I was automatically taken there, and I would not return to my parents' home for some time because my parents they didn't know what to do. And they fought, and they got me what they thought was right. And in some instances it did help, but it's not totally. I was in residential for 9 months. It didn't totally help. They did teach my mother passive restraints, and I'm not hating the fact of that. I just don't think that. I mean, I get you have to protect life and property. I get that. I get that 110%. There is, as I matured over the years, I have the understanding of needing to be safe. There, without a doubt, you need to be safe. But I don't know. I had some mismatch about that over the years and some resentment for a long time. But I knew that at the time, and with that and the things following that, they only did what was best, and they didn't know. In fact, when I was diagnosed in 1998 with Asperger's syndrome at the time, nobody really knew. Even people that I work with, even someone who I even work with today, and I've known for 20 years, do not know the answer. um, didn't know. They had no clue what to do. Autism, Asperger's, we've all merged into the autism levels, but it's evolved greatly. And I think there's more, we talk about more of a presence in it. But, back then, the answer was when I went into them anger or I showed signs of anger, the answer oftentimes, and it was sometimes every day, was put me in a restraint, put me in a restraint, get me out of it, and not giving the time to cope. And even during COVID, when I hit rock bottom, that somewhat kind of did happen. And I had just processed that trauma a few weeks ago. And it took a lot. But in essence, I think, and my parents would often say, restraint, restraint, restraint. That was the thing every day. That was the solving of the problem. And I think, it was sort of bullheadish on me too, because I think they tried their best by giving me cues, hey, go to your room. Hey, just go to your room for a while. And yet I didn't listen because I was stubborn and bullheaded. And sometimes my parents did enrage back. So as time went on, when I got out of residential and got out of the behaviors, so on, they did not happen in school because I was put in a different environment, and that somewhat helped tone that down a little bit. But I mean, there were some other environments where it was unhealthy, and there's a lot of trauma that comes with it. But I'm still processing it, and a lot of it did involve restraint and behavior and things that were very unhealthy. And it's going to take a long time to process it. But I know, but eventually getting out of that made me a different person. And eventually I went meltdown free to the point where I was able to be very successful in high school and not, but yet when things, when I got tense was a lot with my family, and I would take a lot of anger and aggression out on my family, and ultimately resulted in meltdowns. Sometimes it involved getting the law involved, and I can never suggest that, as an autistic person or a family member, to ever, try not to involve the law because of how things are in today's climate. Yet yesterday's climate, their answer was, let's take you to the hospital. That's the answer. And thankfully, some of the most of those instances, my father came to the rescue and, was able to calm me down and say, hey, this is not, he just needs to calm down. He just needs out of this away. He just needs to break away from this. And ultimately, it's what saved me. And it got to the point where, I was the last public meltdown. Well, I wouldn't want to say public, but the last true meltdown of that effect was like 15 years ago. And, for the most part, I kept it to my parents. Sometimes I would do it in day program, and because yet of a triggering or a sensory stimuli, a situation, or just, years of negative effects being taught. And I think now the fact is that, I just got out of it. I just didn't want that to happen. I didn't want people looking at me. I didn't want constant back and forth and anger and hatred. I just wanted to be happy. And that's even with, my mindset being positive. For a long time, I was just in this anger and hatred and just spewing off words and just ugh. But eventually, I think I focused more on my mental health, and I focused on how to avoid getting into those fits of anger and those fits of rage, and just working on doing better. And I am better, and I know that. So, it takes time. And, if to say there was a magic pill or a magic thing, yes, medicine did help. But I mean, there are things you have to deal to manage that too. But it takes time. And to any family member or autistic person out there, don't give up, because I even a year and a half ago, I would have said, here we are again, and what are we going to do to get out of it? So, I think sometimes, we battle with that a lot. And, that's just something, it has to be managed properly. So with that being said, I want to thank you for listening today. Be sure to like and follow this if you are on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest at Dustin's Dynasty. On the web at www.dustinsdynastyusa.com. I'm also on Linktree at Dustin's Dynasty. I'm on TikTok at Dustin's Dynasty ASD, and there's a mirrored YouTube channel for that as well. I want to thank you again for listening. Be sure to have a good day. Take care of yourself and stay safe out there. Bye for now.